It's a Sunday night and you sit down to reflect and chill, and you realize that you've repeated the same patterns of behaviors, the same self-destructive habits as you did the week before, and the week before that, and the week before that. And you get this surge of shame and this surge of, oh, what am I doing? Why did I waste that week? And instead of feeling that shame, instead of sitting with it and dissecting, why did I not do the things I want to do? Instead of sitting with some stillness and trying to understand what happened, you get this surge of motivation. It's like, right, I'm going to plan out the next week and I'm going to go to the gym 3 times or 4 times. I'm going to eat super clean. I'm going to not spend unnecessary money. And you get this motivation, this ideal state of a week, and you're motivated. You go to bed and you're like, right, I'm going to smash it. I'm going to go to the gym in the morning. And then your alarm goes off on Monday morning and it's 6 a.m., 5 a.m. And you wake up and go, nah, I'm going to snooze. So you snooze your alarm for an hour. You get out of bed at 7. You roll out of bed, have a shower, completely forget about the fact that you had to go to the gym or you wanted to go to the gym. And you go to work. You sit in work. You think sporadically throughout work. I'm gonna go to the gym when I go back. I didn't go in the morning, so I'll go when I get back home. And you get through your work day, and then you get home. And what happens is you sit down, open a bag of Doritos, maybe have a can of beer, and you just fulfill self-destructive habits. You sit there and doom scroll on your phone. You scroll through social media. You go through the YouTube algorithm. And then you just live your week repeating that pattern of just self-destructive, not following through with what you said you wanted to do. And it's a repetition. It's a cycle of frustration and shame, and then motivation and idealization, and then failing to meet the ideals and the goals that you've set, and then frustration and shame. And then this becomes a loop. It becomes a cyclical part of your life where you get stuck in a groove, you get stuck in a rut. And this rut continues. And the more you fulfill the rut, the further you get through into it, the easier it feels to do. Like there's less resistance now. There's less fighting up against it. And you just feel kind of this shell of yourself. You kind of go in autopilot and you just feel shameful. And you feel like you can't escape. And you get this sadness, this depression, this extremely low self-esteem that I'm just never going to change. Like, how do you change? I can't change. I'm stuck. I can't do this. And that is a cycle that I'm extremely well adversed on. I would say I've spent the most of my late teens and early 20s stuck in that vicious cycle of wanting to change, trying to break the change, and then getting stuck in the loop of just giving into the self-destructive habits, getting stuck in the loop of just never enacting the discipline to actually create change. And I say that, and I look at like the physique I've built, and I look at the person I've become and the habits I'm consistent with. And I definitely broke little parts of it, and I definitely did progress. But there was always this overwhelming sense of I'm looping back, that I'm always gonna come back into depression. I'm always gonna come back into some sort of self-destruction. And it was like this possession. It's like this idea of you're going to fail. You can't keep this up. Like when I'd be doing well, when I'd maybe get like a week or 2 weeks of consistency, there'd be like this numb, depressive voice. It would be like a feeling, a tone that would give me the overriding sense of this isn't going to last forever. You're going to fall back into your old habits. And eventually, like, the consistency would slip. I would miss the gym for a day, or I wouldn't meditate, or I'd start going on my phone. And then this would then start building its neural groove. Like it would start becoming a habit and a pattern. And then I'd start going on my phone more. And because I was on my phone more, I'd start feeling more anxious and depressed. And because I was more anxious and depressed, I would start missing gym sessions, or I would start not eating clean and like binge eating to escape the feelings that I was getting from this. And it would repeat over and over and over again. And that cycle would come back. And then once I was further into it, it would feel harder and harder to get away until I got to a point of like desperation, a point of breaking where it was all just too overwhelming. And I'd snap and be like, oh, I'm going to change this. And then I'd write out a schedule of how I'm going to change. And then I would go again. And the same pattern just repeated over and over again. And it would never sort itself out. I felt like I was stuck in it for years. And luckily now, I don't feel the cyclical nature of being stuck in loops anymore. And it's not that I have to break the loops. I just don't fall into loops. And in this podcast, I'm going to explain kind of why we get stuck into loops and how to recognize it and become aware of it, and how to actually break the loops and enact change in our life. And I'm going to come at it from different facets of like the biological reasons of like why humans fall into loops. Then I'll talk about the reason why our bodies have such a automatic response for us behaving in certain ways, and how to actually break the patterns of the body and become more embodied and remember where you are and be more mindful. And then also I want to talk about the abstract, philosophical, psychological, imagistic part of your psyche that creates the narratives and the stories and the images around you being stuck in patterns and what that means. And in each section we're going to dissect it and try and apply practical knowledge into how we can understand it, help it build our awareness to eventually become more grounded and whole, and to stop us from being stuck in loops and habits. And this is the first real podcast I've done in a while. I recorded an episode the other day, which was me just doing like an introduction. And I noticed that my articulation and the thought process was a little bit like off still, because I haven't been podcasting in a while. So really just like bear with me, guys, if I'm like stuttering a little bit or I'm repeating myself or going over words. I've done a fair amount of research for this podcast, just to make sure that I am keeping it structured. So I'm going off bullet points, and hopefully it doesn't feel like I'm just talking off bullet points. It is pretty seamless. But yeah, just bear with me, because I feel like this is going to be a good episode. And so why cycles? Let's start with that. Why does the human nature, why does the human predicament seem to be cyclical, in terms of we get stuck in depressive loops, or we seem to repeat the same things over and over again? Why are humans seeking out experiences that are the same? And I always like to start things from an evolutionary point of view. And I think this really starts a conversation off in quite an interesting fact, because we are just a process of our ancestors successfully reproducing for upwards of billions of years. Since the dawn of human history, things have reproduced collectively and consistently, and it's got us to where we are. And through that process, we have developed certain mechanisms, emotions, ways of thinking. Our biology have all adapted through the natural process of natural selection, through things becoming more and more in tune of what has helped us survive. And why I think humans, more than anything, are built towards patterns is because the human predicament is, it costs a lot of energy. It really does. It takes a lot of energy to be a human. Your body burns a lot of calories, and your mind takes up like 40% of all the calories that you consume. It takes up a lot of energy. And so if the mind is constantly having to think of what it's doing, it kind of gets lost in its own process. Like, think if nothing was unconscious, right, and you was conscious of everything, you'd have to control your heartbeat, you would have to control your blood pressure, you'd have to control the digestion of food in your gut. And so certain things have had to been taken away from our conscious mind, because if we were to be conscious of everything, we'd be extremely overwhelmed and we wouldn't be able to get anything done. So things become unconscious and they get ingrained as habits and patterns in our mind. And these patterns and these systems just play out like your digestive system. As soon as you eat food, it digests the food without you thinking. And the brain works in very similar ways, right? So it works with very similar ways of, in terms of your personality. So let's use the example of driving cars. So when you first start driving, it's really awkward. It's really clunky. You've got to think about like, what gear am I putting it in? How fast am I going? Or I need to make sure I'm braking at this time. And you're thinking about everything. You start tripping yourself up because you're constantly thinking about it. But you're very aware. You're very conscious of what you're doing. But after a while, it starts becoming unconscious in the fact that you don't think about doing the gears. You don't think about You don't think about where you're going when you commute to work. You kind of just switch off and you just go somewhere else, and the unconscious part of your mind takes over and kind of gets you to that destination without you actually being there. And so the mind wants to know how to do things, and it wants to take it away from conscious awareness to then put it into the back of your mind so you don't have to constantly think about doing things. And so whatever is ever something that you repeat will eventually get ingrained as a habit, and you will no longer have to think of it, and there'll be an unconscious force. This habit will start playing its own natural process. It will become something that you act without actually doing it yourself. It becomes extremely unconscious. And so think about the fact of the addicting habits that you do. So like social media, for example. You might have started out with social media, just going on Facebook when you was younger, or Snapchat or whatever, and you wouldn't spend all day on it. But these apps were so perfectly designed to keep you coming back on the platform that every day you would spend a bit more and a bit more time on the platform. And all of a sudden, your mind is creating these neural pathways, these neuro grooves, they're connections in your brain that's reinforcing that habit. It's reinforcing the fact that I check my phone. And it takes your decision away from it eventually, because you do that thing so much. It takes away your choice, and you end up just fulfilling that without becoming aware. It becomes unconscious. And so when you live the same day over and over again, when you do the same things over and over again, your mind starts becoming unconscious, and it becomes cyclical. It creates its own loop, and you live out that loop without being aware of it. And so let's take it back to your day-to-day existence, when you're just living your life and you're sat there and it becomes a Monday and your alarm goes off. You've repeated the same Monday over and over again, the same self-destructive habits of eating the rubbish food and watching the adult websites that you shouldn't be watching, consuming doom scrolling content, like all of that. You've repeated it so often that your mind automatically goes to that place when you wake up. And when you live your Monday, it just automatically goes there because it's what's been repeated over and over again. So it's created for efficiency. It's helping you survive in that process. Like when you're scrolling social media, or when you're living just your normal life, like you're sending signals to your brain that you're surviving. You're alive. And the whole human predicament is a strive for survival. It wants to survive. And so when you just sit there and doom scroll, you're in no physical harm. You're in no mental harm, really. Like you're just sat there. And so your body is chasing the thing that is helping it survive. And so you're accidentally tricking your brain into thinking, all right, this is good for me because I'm surviving. And it's a very tricky sort of predicament that we're in, because it's survival. It's working. Like you are surviving. Genes are meant to, like, they have two things, the survival mechanisms and the ability to want to go and pass on our genes. And if it sees that you're surviving, then that's good enough for that. There's a chance that you can move on and pass on your genes. You also have the dopamine system, which I wanted to talk about, which is the pain and pleasure balance. And if you don't know what dopamine is, it's kind of the anticipation hormone. It anticipates that something is going to make us feel a certain way. And so when you have this idea of scrolling through social media, you're sat there and you're trying not to go on social media for the day, and then all of a sudden a thought pops up into your mind, and it's like, oh, I want to go on social media. And the dopamine has been increased in your mind, and it tries to get you to act out that fact of going on social media, because you've associated going on social media with some sort of pleasure, with some sort of getting you out of your own mind, or giving you something that you're not getting right now. And so the dopamine's been increased, and it creates like a motivation. It creates this act to go and do something. And so you end up going fulfilling that. And then again, you create the neural pathways and neural connections that you want to keep repeating the process over and over again. And so you get the short-term release of dopamine, which feels temporarily gives you the satisfaction. But then the natural system of dopamine is to deplete and then go again. So you get stuck in the cycle of desiring things, getting the thing, realizing it didn't make you feel how you wanted it to make you feel, and then you start desiring again. And the Buddhists call it the hedonic treadmill. And that's what you get stuck on. And so biologically, there is mechanisms, and the neuroscience of the brain is really evolved for you to repeat patterns and to get stuck in ways of being. So it's a real shame that our mind is like this, but our mind would have never, the neurochemistry in our brain has been evolved in that way to help us survive. We wouldn't be here today if we didn't have the dopamine reward and pleasure system. Like back in the day when we was hunter-gatherers, that was evolved to help us go out and hunt for food and to seek out mates. But because we live in such a culture and a society of comfort, the system now doesn't know the fact that what we're actually doing is hampering our progress and causing us self-destruction. It's just working on the fact of, oh, this has made me temporarily feel satisfaction, so I'm going to chase it. And you get lost in the dopamine cycle. And why I think it's important to know the biological, and you don't need to go into like, I'm not overly educated on neuroscience, and I don't necessarily want to be. I don't actually see too much practicality in the fact of knowing all the different brain regions, and like it's just not one of my interests. But the reason I think it's important to understand the dopamine system and to understand just like how neural pathways kind of fire together and wire together is because it creates this mini awareness in your mind that you are kind of at mercy to how humans have evolved. And so you stop beating yourself up as much. You're like, wow, my brain's actually designed to work like this. And with that little awakening, it's like you don't feel as bad. You don't feel as shameful. You're like, wow, this is just part of being a human. Is like I'm dealing with this old evolutionary process that has helped our ancestors survive for millions of years. And now I've just got to learn to adapt to that in modern day. And with that becomes the knowledge of like, how can I learn to control this in a way that works for me instead of against me? And there's like a mini awakening there. You're like, my brain has probably got this tendency to self-destruction sometimes. It's got this tendency to chase things that feel easy and help me survive. The molecule dopamine is literally trying to get me towards things. So how can I direct it to push it in the way of helping me pursue the right things instead of things that are going to make me feel negative and make me feel depressed and anxious? And so there's like a mini awakening that comes from knowing the biology and like the neurochemistry of the brain. As I said, I don't think it actually solves loads. I don't think it gets to the issue of why are you craving self-destructive habits, because I think there's a deeper reasoning of why these pathways and the dopamine receptors are pushing you there. But I think it creates a little bit of space between you and your actions, and I think it is important to understand. And so next, I want to talk about the somatic experience and how the body and the mind aren't separate, and the body holds a lot of our unconscious habits. And it's a very unrecognized part of psychology and psychotherapy and any form of healing is the fact that we are humans that are incarnated into the material world with a body, and that body is what helps us move things in the world. It's what makes us of someone of the world, and we are humans in a world that have to go and work and have to interact with other people, and we do that through a body. Like our body is what holds us here. And we are all far too attached up to a narration and an importance of what's going on in the mind. And we forget where our feet are. And we forget that our body is something that helps us interact and connect and move and act change in the world. And so there's a very interesting theory, somatic experiencing from Peter Levine. And he talks about how your body holds on to repressed energy and trauma, and how you have like blockages in your body that prevent issues from being solved. So say if you have an acute trauma in your life, let's say if when you're a child, you get a little bit bullied, or it could be extreme from something that's really negative, some real dark stuff that people experience. The mind and the body have got these amazing mechanisms built in to prevent you from feeling the full amount of that pain. And you'll notice a lot of trauma, people that have trauma, they experience this thing called dissociation, which is their brain puts up barriers and defense mechanisms and pulls them out of their body, so they're not really there when they're experiencing the trauma, and it creates a pulling away from the body and a narration in the mind. So it can go somewhere safe in the mind. It's kind of like you recluse inwards, forget that you're there in the body, and you're not really experiencing what's happening, you're not feeling what's happening. And this can happen from one bad traumatic experience, or it can happen from loads of acute traumatic experiences, from you just not fitting in to your parents' ideals, to getting shouted at, to getting bullied. All these things can create forms of dissociation and prevents you from feeling what you're meant to feel at that moment. And it does it in a protective way. It's a defense to keep who you are at a core, your ego structure, safe from breaking. Because say if you're like a young child and something happens that's traumatic, if you are really there to feel that traumatic experience and you're there to feel all the sensations, it will be extremely overwhelming, and it's got a chance of breaking your ego structure. It's got a chance of completely capitulating your whole idea of who you are. It can be that painful that someone that young can't deal with it. So the human process and the human psyche has these like really innate wise systems to prevent defenses from us feeling things, and it comes in forms of dissociation. But what happens then is, because what we're meant to feel is emotions and the raw sensations of things, because we're unable to feel them, they get repressed and trapped in the body. And what gets repressed doesn't have its release, so they get stuck there, and it creates blockages of energy within your body. And so as the mind stops you from feeling what's in the body, your body starts to become numb, and you get loads of aches and pains in your bodies, and you get like numb sensations, and you start to become numb to what's actually happening in the somatic experience. And how this relates to repeating patterns of trauma is that when you get stuck in cycles, and when you live the same day over and over again, or you have the same depressive mood over and over again, it's because there is raw sensations and there's raw trauma that are sitting within your body that need to be expressed, but you are unable to feel them because your mind has got defense mechanisms that are sitting there preventing you from sitting with them and feeling them. And it's whatever you can feel will eventually dissipate. So the whole idea of Vipassana meditation is that when you feel the raw sensations of an emotion or even a thought, its natural process will to arise, to feel it, and then to dissipate. And everything in reality is flux. Everything is changing. If you're really mindful and you can focus on the sensations of your hands or your fingers, you'll notice that things come and go at an extremely rapid rate. And energy is meant to move. It's meant to be constantly changing. But when we have this repression, when we have this traumatic experience, we notice that the energy doesn't get felt, and it gets stories, it gets energy that blocks it inwards, and it sits within our body, and it causes dis-ease, it causes illness within the body. And so I always like using the example of a gazelle out in the wild. So there's a gazelle out in the wild, and it's like mowing around, and it's eating grass, or it's on the savannas in Africa, and it's kind of like just mowing around. And all of a sudden it hears like a rattling over in the bush. And you'll notice how it will like stop, and it will stiffen up. And instead of moving, it will stay really still, and it will just slowly move its head and kind of look for any sort of movement, or it'll be really attuned to any sort of noise. And all of its like inner muscles and organs are all like pumping blood to the right parts for it to rather fight or flight, to get ready to fight or to run away. And then a tiger will run out of the bush, and this gazelle will instantly snap into like flight mode, and it will run, and it will be dodging and diving, and the whole process of the body will be taking it away. And say the gazelle escapes, and it's escaped the lion or the tiger. What you'll notice is as soon as it's safe and as soon as it goes back to wanting to just chill and and just mowing at the grass and kind of just walking around, you'll see the gazelle shake. You'll see it shake its whole body out. And what it will do is it will shake the energy that it's I can't speak. It will shake away the energy that it's occurred through that fight or flight response. And so it's natural for stress to come up, to use it in the right way, and then to let it go and to shake it out. But what happens with humans is we have a prefrontal cortex. We have a very rational mind that can start rationalizing these situations, and it can start creating stories and narratives around it. And it keeps us in this perpetual fight or flight response. Instead of letting the emotions and the sensations come and then go, it comes up, and then we create stories around, oh, it's not safe, or I'm this sort of person who must feel this. And then the mind creates narratives and defense mechanisms around the sensations. And instead of letting it come and go and be used for what it's for, the fight or flight response gets locked in our body, and stressful hormones will be released from that. You'll get an increase in like cortisol and adrenaline, and all of that energy, that locks up energy, stays within your body as trauma. It stays up as traumatic experiences that should have been released, that your body inherently knows how to release it. And so it's encoded in your nervous system to not release the energy, to not let go of the energy. And your nervous system holds on to that, and it gets stuck in this perpetual fight or flight response. And then what happens is, like, if any situation comes up that brings up any sort of comparison to the original trauma or things that you've experienced, instantly your nervous system will kick straight into gear, and your muscles get ready, and you will then repeat the sensation of the original trauma or the acute traumas, and you get stuck in a pattern with that. And so a lot of people, when they're repeating patterns, it's like their body has got so much blocked energy, it's got so much like trauma built into it, that I kind of like the idea of it being a water pipe. So water's going down the pipe, and there's like something blocking the water from fully coming through, and it's building up and it's building up and it's building up, and eventually it's building up to such a pressure that water starts spilling out of the pipe from all different ways. It's finding a release in whatever way it can. And your self-destructive habits and your cyclical nature is the trauma, is the energy finding its release in whatever way possible. And this can come from binge eating. This can come from dissociative tendencies of scrolling social media. This can come from anxiety in certain social situations. This can come from not going to the gym and just sitting in your room and being a recluse. All of these can be like spills of energy from this acute trauma, from this blockage of energy that sits there. I had a really interesting example of this. I was walking Dudley, my dog. We go down this certain lane, and when he was a puppy, we'd always walk down this lane, and there'd always be a dog on the other side. And he'd like come out barking. It's a big German Shepherd. He's like, woof, 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 like proper barking at him. And Dudley was only like a small little boxer dog. And he would always like, you would see the hairs on the back of him like go up, and he'd be like shivering and cowering away. And then he'd walk past it, and then he would like, he would move on. And then as we started walking him down this place more and more, he started anticipating the fact that this dog was going to come out barking for him. So before he got anywhere near the lane, he would get really nervous and shaky, and you would see him. And we would just like take him another way. We would just take him to another different part, because it was like, oh, he's getting nervous around that place. And then after reading Somatic Experiencing, especially Waking the Tiger of Peter Levine, and after reading the example of the gazelle and how animals like expel trauma, I was like, I'm going to take him down there and like kind of force him to go down there and see what happens. And I noticed like as he was getting closer and closer to this place, his hairs were standing up and he's really nervous. And the dog came back out and started barking at him, and we moved on. But as we moved on, I went to my dad. I was like, watch, he's going to shake his body in a minute. And as soon as he knew it was safe, he went and shook his body and shook some of that energy. And ever since, I take him down there often, and now he just shakes his body when he goes past there less and less, and he doesn't get as nervous anymore. Like, you don't see the hair stand up on his back. You don't see him fall into that like negative process of of becoming nervous. Like he just walks down there and he's fine now. And because he's worked through it, he's releasing the energy as he goes through it. He's become, like in a way, he's become aware of it and he's released the energy. And so how can we do this as humans? How can we feel the blockages and realize where they are and start letting them go naturally? And firstly, I think mindfulness really helps with this. I did Vipassana meditation, which was a meditation where you scan the body, and instead of focusing on the breath or focusing on a certain sense like sound or smell or even just the thought process, you focus on the sensations of the body and you kind of scan the body as you go. And I first started with a thing called Anapana, which is like you focus on, it is the breath, but you focus on the sensations of the part of your, just underneath your nose and above your mouth, kind of a little triangle thing. You've just focused really acutely on the little sensations that are going on there. And then eventually, once you've done that for a while, you start with the top of your head and you start feeling the different parts of your body and you start realizing what feels like numb. And you do this with a thing called equanimity. It's not to try and change things. You just want to feel exactly how the sensations feel. And then you start scanning down your body and you start realizing like, whoa, I hold on to like this weird tension in my shoulder. Like it's a little bit sore and it feels heavy and quite painful. And it feels like it kind of like wants to click. And then going down into my wrist is like a little bit sore and my fingers want to pulsate. And like you start realizing and not narrating what it feels like, but just noticing the pure sensations. And you do this, and I found when I sat my Vipassana meditation retreat, was that like I would really focus on the sensations of the body, and through like feeling them and letting them come and go and just feeling what was truly there, I'd be getting like childhood memories pop up into my mind and weird experiences that I had from growing up, like happening, and real like emotions of like sadness or depression or anxiety arising. But I just, then again, I would come back and focus on the sensations and let them dissipate and go. And so meditation's great for this. Meditation's great for just being aware of the sensations and the emotions and the feelings of your body and kind of letting them arise and then pass. And that can be a great way of like expressing somatic experiencing. Another great sort of modality that you can use is a process called bioenergetics, and this is by a guy called Alexander Lowen. He's kind of in like the 60s, and he follows the analytical process of psychoanalysis from Freud and Wilhelm Reich, who was the first person who derived from Freud, who mostly talks about the body in psychotherapy. And so he came from like that sort of school where he was like, Wilhelm Reich was really into like the sensations of the body, and Alexander Lowen kind of just developed on that, and he developed this theoretical psychoanalysis called bioenergetics, and it talks a lot about sitting in certain positions and putting certain stresses on your body where it forces the parts of your body to pulsate and move, and you can kind of move through blockages of energy. And I think an evolution of this is just a lot of movement practices, like kind of like animal movements, and sitting there and sitting in positions like the deep squat position and feeling where the body's aching and where it's vibrating and pulsating and feeling the sensations of that. And in bioenergetics, his whole idea is that we have a thing called the schizoid tendency, which is because we develop this thought process and we have so much trauma, we learn to dissociate from the body and live up in a narrative in our mind. And most people have the sensation of they are someone who lives somewhere in between their skull, like somewhere behind the eyes, locating consciousness somewhere in the middle of their head. Like you have the experience that you look out from the world from there, and we are up here. But I don't think that's natural in the thought process of bioenergetics. It's like we're actually where our feet stand. We're a whole body. There's no disconnection between body and mind. And the idea that we're the narrative in our mind or the person talking is the dissociation. It is the schizoid tendency. And it's kind of schizophrenic in a way. Like if you watch your own mind, if you watch your own experience of consciousness, you notice that there's this person talking over and over again, just constantly narrating what's going on in your life. And yeah, it's it's destructive. It's self-destructive. It's constantly trying to put you down. It's constantly trying to like question what you're doing, and like it stops you from feeling your body. It's schizophrenic in a way. But when you actually learn how to sit into the body and feel comfortable with being in your body and like feeling the way your feet hit the ground, you move at a slower pace. You become more natural, and you increase your motility, which is like you're a natural expression of energy. You allowed energy to like flow into your body more. And when you're just a conscious will, and you're really dissociated from the body, you're forcing the body to move from the mind, and it's a forceful thing. But when you're embodied, when you realize where your feet are, you act out from more of like natural process, from spontaneity, from the body's energy, and that the body gets the energy from the floor, it gets the energy from the oxygen it consumes. It's not the process of the mind. And the mind can get really repressive in a way where like the conscious will is just the ego, or this neurosis trying to pull you forward in the world. But if you come into the body more and you can move from the body, it's like the natural process of the universe flows through you more and gives you more energy. And so then leading on to that, another personal note for me would be like just the importance of like moving your body through exercise and the gym. The gym's been such a lifesaver for me, and just moving my body and exercising, whether that be football or calisthenics, like movement practices, just moving your body, it really allows you to express some of that like blockages and kind of release the tension from it all. It doesn't get to the core of the reason of why the blockages are there, but it allows to like release the energy a little bit. It dissipates the energy, and it can be a massive release of stress and tension. And every time I go and do a workout, or anytime I go and do some form of movement, I'm always like, I just feel better for it. I always feel more like relaxed, and it's an expression of the energy in your body, and it allows you to move, like release some of the blockages or release the tension of the blockages. And so any sort of movement practice or exercise is incredibly important there. It's a safe release of anger. And so after that, now we're going to move on to the psyche and the unconscious forces of why. What's the mind part of all this? So we talked about the biological and now the somatic experience within the body, like talking from a bottoms up approach. But what's happening deep in the psyche that's creating all this? And I think the first important bit is like habits are symptoms, they're not the root cause. So when people look to change, when people look to try and create the new life, they're like, right, I notice that I'm doing these self-destructive habits that aren't getting me towards the place that I want to get to. So I'm just going to replace them with good habits, and I'm going to cast a vote for the person I want to be and just continuously act that out. But then what they refuse to deal with, what they refuse to look at is, why am I fulfilling the self-destructive habits? What is the reason that the part of my psyche is calling me towards binge eating, towards scrolling through social media, towards dating the wrong people? Why is my psyche creating this cyclical nature, this loop that I'm stuck in? And I think when you dig deeper into the why, where is this coming from, you start to realize that the psyche is just creating the symptom of a habit, and the root actually lies within the suffering that's within the psyche. The psyche is such a complex thing. It really is. It's full of images. It's full of, our mind is full of different personalities, sub-personalities. It's full of all of this like imagination, all these processes that are going on. It's kind of this never unfolding ocean of energy that's moving through. And it's kind of like our awareness, our ego awareness is just this one little ball that sits bobbing away on the ocean. And the depths of the psyche is everything that we're in, that we're floating on. So we're very conscious, or we're aware of a very little part of our actual collective psyche. And so if you're stuck in a loop right now, if you're stuck in this cyclical nature, you just casting a vote for the person you want to be, you just trying to change your habits little bit by little bit, isn't dealing with the root cause of why you have been given into self-destructive habits, why the confidence isn't there for you to go out and try something new, why you're binge eating so often, why you're scrolling through social media. Them actions that you're fulfilling, that they're trying to get you away from something, that some deep pain and deep trauma that sits and resides within your mind. And so I always think a helpful little exercise that I do is I try and speak with the different parts of myself. So I look at when I'm stuck in a habit and I'm stuck in a rut, and I start questioning, like, what parts of me want to be stuck in this rut? What are they trying to tell me? What are they trying to communicate with me? And I try and build a relationship with the process that's going on. And so say if I'm waking up every day and then like I'm instantly missing my alarm and going to work, and then I'm finding that I'm getting home and I'm not going to the gym and I'm just sitting there scrolling through social media. I find if I get deeply quiet and I sit there and like maybe even with a journal and I ask like, why do I keep doing this? What do you want? What does this part of me want? It's not me. I'm asking the part of me, what does it want? And normally I'll get a response from a sub-personality within my mind. And if you don't know, like from a Jungian perspective or a depth psychology perspective, like the mind is made up of sub-components of personalities. We're like a collection of personalities that make the whole. And so when you've got parts of you that are like inclined to go out and feel self-destruction, it's important to communicate and dialogue with them parts, because you can understand what they're trying to tell you. And the parts of us, they're just these energy forms that want expression out into the world. And so they're finding expression in any way they can. And so this might be from the inclination towards self-destructive habits or consuming social media. So if you can sit there really quiet and come at the parts of you that are making your life worse with compassion, you can start realizing why these things are trying to do it. Why are they trying to express their way? What are they trying to tell you? And I often find it's that they don't feel heard. There might be like an inner child within you. There might be a part of you that is a 4-year-old you, a 6-year-old you, a 13-year-old you that wants love and compassion. It wants to go and express itself in a certain way, but you're repressing it. You're not allowing it to do that. So it's taken over your conscious will and fulfilling what it deems is right without your guidance. And so in some ways you're controlled by a 4-year-old, you're controlled by a 6-year-old, you can be controlled by a 13-year-old, or a part of you that's like angry about the world, or like these different parts of you overtake your conscious will and they act out in your life. And that's how you can feel so unconscious when you do things, because if we equate ego with awareness, when these sub-personalities and these parts of your psyche overtake the ego, you are no longer aware. You're acting out the unconscious habits and goals and desires of a part of you that you haven't integrated into a whole. And to build a stronger ego, to build a more aware ego, is to dialogue with these different parts of you and kind of meet them in the middle and discuss with, how can I make you happy? How can I make you be aligned with me, and become aware of the fact when they do come up, what do they feel like, what are they wanting? And sometimes you have to learn to notice that they're there and kind of repress them, because we can't just go through our whole life giving into everything that comes up within our mind. But you need to create space to realize, what is this part of me telling me to do? What is it trying to get from me? What is it trying to fulfill? What does it want to hit? What does it want to be heard? And this parts work is so incredibly important, because it's about creating kind of this community within your mind of parts of your energy that are collectively working together and not against each other. And that's why people can be stuck in such contradictions and such like contradictionary goals. Part of them wants to go out and get a good physique and get a really attractive woman, but the other part of them is eating junk food and watching loads of adult entertainment websites and secluding himself in his room. And the two parts of you there are contradicting. They're going against each other. But instead of just thinking, right, I'm going to cast a vote for the one part of me that wants to be good, and constantly fighting this part of you, it's like, no, let's ask that part of me that's moving me towards self-destruction why it's doing that. What does it actually want? Because if you're constantly just trying to discipline your will into focusing on the positive, the negative will just gain more and more energy, because what you tend to repress builds up more and more energy. It's like what you resist persists. and it might not come out in that way that you're trying to discipline yourself in, but it will come up in your life in another way, because all of our parts of our psyche want to express herself in any way possible. And so just like trying to discipline your conscious will into doing one thing actually creates more suffering in your mind. And a lot of the reasons why people get stuck in habits is because they beat themselves up so much and they try and discipline themselves so much, and they don't listen and come at compassion with the parts of their psyche that are trying to achieve their own different things. And it's like people feel possessed when like they want to do the self-destructive habits. Like if we think of drug addiction and people that want to go and get like a class A substance, to say any of them. I don't want to say the actual names on here because I think YouTube like suppresses your videos when you start saying all the different things that you shouldn't be saying. But let's say if someone's after, like, they've got a real alcohol abuse substance or like a behavior. They feel possessed when they feel like they have to drink. It's like, I have to go to the pub. I don't want to. I want to start getting healthy and going to the gym. I want to lose weight. But they're constantly like, oh, I have to go. I'll go to the pub. I've got to go. Oh, I'm just there at the pub. I don't want to go. I don't want to go to the pub. But now I'm here and now I'm having 3 pints. And it's a possession. It's like they're being possessed by something. They're being manipulated by something. And it's because they're not listening to the parts of themselves that are trying to communicate with them. And I also think that the psyche will go to extreme lengths to create suffering in your life if you're not listening to your true calling. And so if you refuse to listen to the deep parts of you, your greater self, the voice of your soul that's trying to get you towards your real authentic path, it will create forms of suffering to get you to listen. It will create a neurosis. It will create a thought pattern or an emotion or an energy that will cause suffering in your life because it needs you to listen to the deeper intuition that's born within you. And I think we often refuse that call. We often refuse the call to listen to our own psyche because we think our ego and our conscious wills know better. And this is why there's so much suffering within the mind. So we need to be able to trust not just the intellect, because the intellect is important, but we need to be able to trust the intuition to know that like there's something deep within us that wants to play its natural path, and it wants to be heard, and it needs to be heard because it's what we should be doing. And when we don't follow that path, it goes against a deep genetic code of our psychic imprint, and the mind will create suffering until we listen to that. And this is where you can go into shadow work. A lot of people repeat processes and loops and patterns because it's their repressed shadow acting out. And if you don't know what the shadow is, it's the repressed parts of your psyche, of your personality, that don't fit in with your ego's ideal. They get pushed back to the unconscious part of the mind. And if you think of the ego as light, as shining on something, what it doesn't want to see, it's not going to shine on. So the rest sits in the shadow, it sits in the dark. And you could have parts of you that you don't agree with. Say if you really hate people that just waste time and are lazy, and so you've attached to the idea that I'm not lazy, I don't waste time. But then there's parts of you that do waste time and are lazy. Your mind, your ego ideal won't want to see that, so it represses it and puts it into the shadow. And people, if you don't integrate your shadow, you will act out your shadow entities, your shadow processes, because it's an energy that, again, has to be expressed. Things have to find an expression. Things always want to find an expression, so they always try and act out in the world. And so if you're not aware of your shadow, if you don't try to integrate your shadow, it will act out in your life and continuously cause patterns and self-destructive processes. There's another interesting point of view I want to come at this from. This is more like a spiritual point of view, and I heard Ram Dass talk about this when I was I think I took some edibles one day, and I remember watching Ram Dass, and he was talking about addiction, and I remember just sat there thinking, well, that was one of the most well-defined descriptions of addiction that I think I've ever heard. And it was really enlightening to the fact I was like, wow, that is what my mind does. That's kind of what addiction does. And so his idea was that addictions are attempts to return to the bliss or original state that we was before we was born. And so safe consciousness is this overarching soup of awareness, and the universe is kind of just flown with energy, and we're all part of the same thing. The whole lot of the religious teachings are we are all one, we come from the same thing. And when we get incarnated into a human body, we create an ego and a mind that separates us from the oneness. It separates us from the oneness of the universe. And what Randas says is like the when you get moments of bliss and you get moments of peace, you remember the true nature of who you are. And a lot of it is just like being mindful. It's not attaching to the thought process and just being where you are. When you're on of no thought, you are then remembering the nature of oneness, because you're not there as a separate entity to question things or to view things. You are just kind of living out the natural course of the universe. You're a part of it. But what happens is we have this ego, we have this narration in our mind, which is constantly talking and abstracting things and taking us away from the present moment. And what Randas says is we have this constant craving to get back to that oneness, to get back to the present moment. There's a constant battle in our mind to get back to the present moment. And what your mind does, it creates addictions to get you back to the present moment. Instead of you actually just being in the present moment, the mind's very tricky. It creates addictions to get there. So the only way I can describe this is like if you're really hungry and you want to binge eat or something, or if you just want to eat some food and you're suffering because you're so hungry you want to eat food, and all you can think about is food. And I need food. I'm just going to eat all this. I don't want to eat it, but I'm going to eat it anyway. And then you finally eat the food. As you're eating the food, you are extremely mindful of how good it feels. It's like a release of pressure. It releases the tension of that addiction. That energy and that narration all goes because you fulfilled its desire. And when you fulfill a desire temporarily, it's like an out breath. It feels really relaxing. It feels really rewarding. And you feel like all warm and vibrant. You're feeling all the sensations of it. But then once you finish with that action, the thought process then builds up again. The mind then builds up again. And then you start craving and desiring another thing. And that's when the dopamine, we can bring it back to the biological, that's when the dopamine rush starts coming in again. And the whole dopamine cycle repeats. But what the mistake here is your mind has attached the release of tension to fulfilling the desire, when actually it's not the thing that you're consuming that's releasing the desire. It's just the forgetting the thought process. It's just the letting go. It's the letting go of fulfilling that desire. Because you fulfilled it, you no longer crave that desire in that moment, and you get a temporarily, like you are there with it. And it's the basic form of addiction. You mistake the thing that you're chasing to give you pleasure, when in actuality it's causing you suffering, because you're just constantly chasing it. And the moment you get it, you then chase the next thing. And it's again the hedonic treadmill. And it's very Buddhist in a way. Like Buddhists talk about this. The whole art of suffering is craving, is desiring everything but what is. You always want something different. You always want something to change. And so if you're stuck in a loop, I keep forgetting to bring it back to this idea of a loop. I've kind of just gone on. Like I've kind of had all these notes, and I was like thinking of reading them all, but I've just kind of gone onto a tangent and just talked. And I hope this has been helpful or structured. I don't necessarily know if it has been. I've already been talking for 53 minutes, so I'm going to keep going anyway. What was I talking about? I shouldn't have just gone off on a tangent then. I think I was talking about addictions and the Buddhist perspective. This is the thing about doing a podcast, guys. Sometimes your train of thought just goes and then like takes you out of the moment. Like I wasn't really questioning what I was talking about. I was kind of just flowing. And then as soon as the thought process came up, I looked at my notes and I was like, have I been following the notes? And then you question yourself and you stop the natural process of things happening. You stop the intuition of it all happening. But with that, with the Buddhist craving and the addiction, like if you could just let go of wanting the thing and really let go of it to a point where you can fully let it go, then you will have the same feeling of what you would get if you fulfilled the desire and you temporarily got it, but it would be a continuous state. And that's the whole idea of being present and being mindful, is you can live in that state of no craving, of no desire, and it can be constant, just accepting what's happening and being in tune with the present moment and realizing you're not a separate entity from what is happening. You are just this moment right now. Like, there is no past, there is no future, there is literally just this moment right now. And the moment you start thinking about the moment and abstracting about the moment and what else you want it to be and how you want it to look, is the moment that it takes you away. And like, I was going to bring, this is what I was going to talk about. If you bring it back to being stuck in a loop, the whole idea of being in a loop, the whole idea of being stuck in a depressive loop, is you're wanting your life to be something different than what it is. Let's go back to that Sunday night feeling. You're sat there on a Sunday night and you're questioning, I want life to look like this next week and I want it to be like that. And your expectation of what you want it to be is then creating a form of suffering, because the moment reality doesn't match up with that, or the moment you don't get things right, you then start beating yourself up and causing this whole barrage of self-abusing narratives, and it doesn't match up to how you expected it to be. And then you're caught in the suffering and craving cycle. You're craving different things and you're constantly chasing them, and the only way you can get an escape from what is happening is by craving something that releases the tension of what you think it's not. And so the only way to get out of that craving cycle, to break out of that depressive loop, is just to sit there and go, take a deep breath and just be in what is happening. To not think about it and just do. Don't think, do. Maybe stop expecting your life to be different and accept how your life is. And once you truly accept how your life is, then maybe you can move from a place of authentic creativity and authentic change, instead of coming from a place of lack. You want to come from a place of abundance instead of lack. And when you crave things, and when you're causing yourself suffering, you're coming from a place of real lack. And I wanted to I don't know if this is necessarily that helpful now, guys. I think I'm really getting to the end of it. I did want to talk about ego and how it's a container for our awareness, but I don't think that's necessarily helpful now. I don't think it really actually breaks into breaking out of a loop. And I'm not actually sure how helpful I've been about talking how to break out of a loop. I didn't really keep the chain of that narrative going through the podcast, so I apologize for that, guys. But let's just do some closing takeaways and kind of a recap of what we talked about, and then we'll go. We'll leave it there. I think we've talked enough now. What we are, nearly an hour. And so, yeah, I don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed by all this. I don't want anyone to feel like you're broken or you're stuck. I've been stuck in so many loops in my life, and so many depressive loops and anxiety loops and loops worrying about being in a loop, and it just becomes this never-ending process. And I think the more I've been able to like move into the world and actually like be okay with living my life, the less I've been stuck in loops. Loops have always, for me, they have come from that expectation of wanting to do something that's not happening, and so I repress what's happening out there. I know I don't live my life. And because now I'm in a relationship, and now because I've got like more responsibility in my life, and I'm pursuing things that are different, and I'm actually like engaging in the world more, I no longer feel like I'm stuck in a loop, because the world's giving me more things to adapt to and to react to. But because I was so like seclusive, and because I had this like inner castle or citadel that was preventing me from experiencing the world, like I was stuck in a loop because I was refusing the calling of the world. But as I've like become more grounded, and especially as I've learned to dissociate away from to detach away from the neurosis and the narrative in my mind, and come more into my body, I do generally feel like I engage with the world more, and that engaging with the world is what has caused me to not get stuck in loops as much. And when I do get stuck in the loops, I realise that I'm not engaging in the world. I'm coming more inwards and projecting how I want the world to be. And so if anything, if you're stuck in a loop right now, just go out into the world and live your life. Like, what's in front of you right now? What are you doing right now? What does your job look like? Like, engage with your job. What curiosities do you have? Engage with your curiosities. Like, engage with things. Be engaging. Be of action. Be of doing, but without trying to do, without doing things with the expectation of, I want it to look like this and I want it to look like that. Just go out and do things and try. And actually just be in the world. It's the most important thing, because people now are so glued into their screen, because they're so stuck in habits of worrying how they look and trying to portray this person and that. They're not going out and being of someone in the world. They're not letting the world teach them. Start seeing the world and reality as a teacher. It's a training ground for learning how to be okay with your own psyche. And treat the world like that and engage with it, because the more you engage with it, the calmer your presence will be, and the less loops you'll get stuck in, and the more neurosis that will calm down. The more you'll detach away from the neurosis, and it will calm down. And that's my overall advice for the podcast. I got 55. Well, I got an hour in just to tell you, encapsulate it in that last way. And so, people, thank you very much for listening. I hope that was helpful. I don't know if that was just information overload. Give me some feedback if you can. Let me know. I'm sat here questioning if I should even post this podcast now, because I didn't really stick to the tone of what it was. But yeah, thank you very much for listening, people. Really do appreciate it. I really do enjoy doing this podcast. I wasn't there for most of that. I was kind of just in my own little bubble. I do very feel like it's just an authentic representation of me when I podcast, and the times I do question myself is the times that you'll see me trip up and question what I'm doing. But for most of that, I felt like I just flowed and I didn't really have to think about it. And that feels like a true representation of who I am. And if that isn't good enough to be successful in the world, if that's not good enough to create a big podcast, that's fine, because that is my authentic representation. And I think giving your authenticity into the world is the most that you can do in this life, because it allows your uniqueness to go into the world and be of service. And that then was my uniqueness, it felt like. So thank you very much, people, and I'll see you all in the next episode.